We recognize that CVUUS gathers on land seized from the Western Abenaki people by European colonizers. We respect the Abenaki's spiritual relationship to the land and waters of the Champlain Valley. We are committed to building a peaceful and more just relationship with them and to promoting knowledge about their history and culture. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good. Very good. Beautiful morning. Welcome to CVUUS, the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. I'm Carl Lindholm, today's worship associate. I'm assisting our minister, Barnaby Feeder, in today's service, our annual flower communion. We're glad you have chosen to be here with us on this beautiful spring morning, the first Sunday in the beautiful month of June. CVUUS is a church that sustains a liberal religious tradition, aspires to be visible and active on behalf of social justice and environmental responsibility, nurtures and empowers us at all ages on our spiritual journeys, and reaches out to the larger communities of which we are a part. We hope you find something in today's service which nurtures and stimulates you. This is a good time to adjust your phone if you haven't already. If you're visiting, please sign the guest book in the foyer so we can send you news of activities and events that enrich our time together. And all, do stay after the service for snacks and friendly conversation downstairs in the Ann Ross Fellowship Room. That's my next point. After that, we will be having our annual meeting. And do stay for that, as there is a very important business to conduct, and we must have a forum. Quorum, yes, and a forum. There are many pathways to connection here at CVUUS, activities and events, in addition to Sunday services that bring us together as a community. They are listed in today's order of service and amplified in the blast. I do want to note, and many of you will acknowledge and agree with me, yesterday was a wonderful day for the Rhubarb Festival, and we did very well again. I know my house smelled like wonderful pie. I don't like rhubarbs, but I like the smell of pie. For about 2 days, rhubarbs. So that was great. And then you might note this afternoon is an important discussion about the housing issues in Vermont, the housing crisis in Addison County at 4 o'clock at the Congregational Church. It says June 4th at 5, yes. Don't go tomorrow at 4. I do that on purpose. So do today at 5. It's a seriously important discussion about that. Now, Margie says that if you want a raspberry plant at the Radical Love Party, or you would like a raspberry plant, they are available outside after the service. Raspberry plants. Sounds great. Next week, as Barnaby has his farewell press conference. He will answer your questions. If you are not able to be here next week, if you have a question for Barnaby, do give him an email. Now, before the call to worship and the chalice lighting, I hope you will indulge me for a moment. 2 Sundays ago, I was unable to attend the gathering after the service that celebrated Barnaby's time here as our minister. It was a baseball-themed party without Dr. Baseball. The congregation's gift to Barnaby was highly appropriate, tickets for him and his family to a ball game in Washington, D.C. in July between the hometown Washington Nationals and Barnaby's beloved San Francisco Giants. Yes. So the opening hymn will be "Take Me Out to the..." No, it won't do that. I genuinely regret not having been here in attendance, and I've actually since 2 weeks ago. I've tried to find a way to compensate for my absence. I called the Washington Nationals and asked if Barnaby could throw out the ceremonial first pitch. And they said, "You want us to have a fan of the visiting team throw out the ceremonial first pitch of our game." So I didn't get very far with that. So I got in touch with the manager of the Giants, Gabe Kapler, and asked if Barnaby might bat leadoff in the game and to get a couple of innings in the field, perhaps, as a catcher. And Gabe said politely he didn't think that would work either. So I think, I think Barnaby should at least be garbed appropriately in the colors of his club. So we have this.
There's the fans are going to say, I know the Giants are going through some roster churn this year, but it hadn't gotten that far.
That was actually, I was going to say something I was going to say, he's going to be signing autographs the whole game. So let's have our gathering song at this point. We gather this morning to remind ourselves that every one of us can bring the light of love to the world. We gather to affirm that every heart can burn bright with joy, peace, and harmony. We gather so that the wisdom of the ages may speak to us and abide with us. We gather to proclaim that every one of us can be a blessing to the world. Now for the chalice lighting. The flaming chalice is symbolic of Unitarian Universalism. As our friend Laurie Borden, longtime member, Laurie's a longtime member of this congregation, was once president of the congregation, and she's here visiting her longtime home in Middlebury from her new home in Bozeman, Montana. Now she'll light the chalice, and we'll read, please read with me the words of Susan Frederick Gray, the current president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, on the screen or in your order of service. As we light our chalice this morning, May we be mindful of how radical and powerful love is, and how dangerous those who use fear perceive love to be. May we know how necessary and essential it is to keep alive the message of universal love, of humanity and human dignity, of reverence for life, all creation in our hearts and in our actions. We are now among the keepers of that flame.
Welcome, Lord.
Welcome back.
Good morning. Before I get into the story, I think I need to say something about a tradition I accidentally began, which is there was one time, I don't remember, a couple months ago when I said, good morning, and someone said loudly, good morning, Poppy, and I said, aw, that's so sweet. It's so nice having somebody say my name, which is completely true. I still love it. It was pointed out to me later, or pointed out to somebody in the worship team, that people who are visiting or people who don't know me, hearing the group say, hello, Poppy, which is showing how much the people who say, hello, Poppy, know me, may make some people feel out of the group, or out of the know, or out of community. So I think for myself, even though I love it, I'm gonna rescind my ask and ask that maybe in your hearts, silently, you can say, good morning, Poppy. If you want to. There we go. And I want to say thank you to whoever pointed that out. I actually don't know who it was, but that's exactly the kind of thing that we should be doing in beloved community, is when something doesn't feel right to us, we bring it up. Even if it might make the person who hears it feel bad, which it didn't, but sometimes it does. I've been told stuff that made me feel really bad when it was pointed out, but it was still the right thing to do. So thank you, that's really important that we do that. So now, I would like to share a story with you that really says what I want to say about flower community and the flower communion and the flower ceremony and the point of it to me. So this is a book by Susan Verdi, who does a whole series of books. There's I Am Me, I Am Courage, I Am Peace. There's like 8 of them now. They're an amazing series. If you're looking for books to get for kids, I cannot recommend this series enough. So here we go. I Am Me, a book of authenticity by Susan Verdi, art by Peter H. Reynolds. There are things about me that make me different. Sometimes I stand out in a crowd. Sometimes I am not seen at all, and I feel alone. I start to ask myself, why can't I blend in, fit the mold? Maybe I am too little, or maybe too much. But when I stop and look, I see nothing in this world is exactly the same. Difference is what makes life beautiful and miraculous. And when I show who I truly am, I can find my joy, my spark. I have something to contribute. I can't hold back or hold it in. I am someone to be celebrated. I am me. I can have my own style and decide how I want to show up in the world. I can be grateful for my hair, my skin, my size, because they are all mine. I can be proud of my body and thankful for all it can do. Just an aside, I want to point out that the wording of this book is I can, right? Because this is a journey, at least for me. I am not always grateful for my hair, my skin, my size. So I just want to lift that up, right? We can, but it can be hard. I can embrace that I am perfectly imperfect, because that is what makes me interesting. I can dance to my own rhythm anytime I want to move and groove. I can learn from others who express themselves with confidence, even when it's hard. I can be a role model for someone who is afraid to show their own true colors. I can celebrate the things in this world that I decide are most meaningful to me. Love, peace, unity, hope. I can love anyone I choose, fully and completely, with all my heart. I can notice that every creature has something unique and necessary. I can know that community, connection, and acceptance exist, and I will find them. I can surround myself with those who see me, stand up for me, and support me. I can be okay knowing not everyone will understand me, because I have love for myself. I don't need to hide away, hold back, or compare myself to anyone else. Hard. Because I am me, and I matter. You are you, and you matter. We are just right. Beautiful and miraculous, exactly as we are. Exactly as you are.
While the choir gets ready to sing its anthem, the flower buds are going to bring the flower display to the front of the room while the choir is singing. So you'll have some time to enjoy just the beauty of the display while you're listening to the music and as we move towards the flower communion itself. I don't know if the flower buds could see it, as the choir members are walking very, very close to get to their seats. They're having trouble continuing past. The arrangement is so beautiful. So thank you. And thank you, Dee Carroll, for the painting of the flower that went with the lyrics. We're very fortunate to have that to help us into the spirit. It's a very special Sunday because of the flower communion, but one of the things that makes every Sunday special is our offering to some organization in the community that's also representing the kind of values that we have in the wider world. And this month, as we move towards the Juneteenth celebration on June 19th for the end of slavery in the United States, the end of legal slavery in the United States, we have chosen to celebrate the Rutland chapter of the NAACP. One of our members, Caitlin Gildrian, is the secretary of that chapter, and she'll be here next week to talk about what it means for her to be doing that work, but she couldn't be here today, and so I'm going to introduce the donee simply by saying, first of all, even though it's called the Rutland chapter of the NAACP, it serves Addison County, Rutland County, and Bennington County, so it could be called the Western Vermont chapter of the NAACP. And they come from a long NAACP tradition that it requires a lot of groups working together. And so they've always been a multiracial organization, and their work consists of education in the community, things like letting Vermonters know where our representatives stand on legislation that deals with oppression. They also do programs for younger children. They field complaints 2 or 3 a month and help people get connected with the state and local organizations that can deal with the experiences of discrimination these people have faced. And they are a clearinghouse for all kinds of materials that you might want to read or look at on video to help you get in touch with how you can work on dismantling oppression in yourself and in the wider community and in our institutions. So I invite you to be as generous as you are able this morning in this offering that we share with the Rutland NAACP. invite you to stand in body or spirit as we receive the offering. So a busy week of milestones, and I just want to start out with saying that the reason that Lori was here was that yesterday was the celebration of life for Margot and Borden. It was at the Waybury Inn. A number of us were able to visit with Lori and the family, and we're sorry for the occasion of your being back with us, Lori, but we're so glad you're here and look forward to you visiting at greater length the next time and being able to mingle more. I know you have to head back right away this time. Also, on that same note, for those of you who don't get the Addison Independent, there was a beautiful, beautiful obituary this week for Jerry Loney, and I ask you to get a hold of a copy from a friend. If you didn't get to see it, we'll get a copy of it up here, but it did a fantastic job of capturing Jerry's incredible, generous, wonderful spirit. And he's definitely with us as we do this flower communion activity today. Wanted to mention, I've been in touch with Steve Trombulak, a longtime member of the congregation who moved away. One of the things I do is I keep him in touch with what's happened to some of the members who were very active when he was here, and I wanted to tell him about Jerry. And in the note back, he said, well, the biggest news for him is that after 6 years of work with a friend named Martin Bridge, they've published a book called The Way of Gaia, which is a collection of writings and artwork related to the pagan spirituality that Steve follows. And it's available at Nature Culture for people who are interested in that kind of thing. Nature Culture, all one word. And this kind of the subtitle, as far as I can tell, is Opposing Chaos with Energy Becomes Purpose in Life. And I love that phrase, opposing chaos with energy becomes purpose in life. So congratulations to Steve for completing that project. 6 years they worked on it. We had a lot of work that went into a project here yesterday. The Rhubarb Festival was mentioned that it was quite a success. And so I have a couple of notes thanking people who were involved from other people in the congregation, particularly Mary Hadley and Lise Anderson, who played a big role in leading it. But I know Brett Millier played a huge role in the baking part of it, and all kinds of other people were involved. And a great debt of thanks to everybody who made the 14th year of this tradition a success. Our Minister Emerita, Johanna, is in the audience there at the back, and it was she was the prime mover, and she came up to me yesterday at the Rhubarb Festival and said, so it's outlasted both of us. She said that with satisfaction. That's a tribute to you folks. This year, the preliminary accounting is $5,700 to be shared with Hope. So a wonderful job on the financial front too, even though that's not the biggest part of why we do it. Finally, just another couple of notes about who we are as community. Joan Soper, a new member this year, said, I arrived back in Middlebury after being away almost 30 years, a year ago today. And being here with us for the last year has been an important part of Joan's reintegration, and we're so happy to be available for that. And today is Steve Fiddler's birthday. And for those of you who don't know Steve, he doesn't come often to worship because it's difficult for him because he's blind. But we do keep track of him and we do interact with him. And Pat Schmitter, who gave us this card, said that in honor of his birthday, she's going to prepare his favorite chicken wing recipe for him this week. And so when you give it to him, Pat, make sure it comes with all of our love. There are always unspoken joys and concerns and sorrows and pleasures, and I normally just say to you, I'm going to give you a time of silence to get in touch with what's on your heart. I want to lead you into that silence today with a meditation prayer from a poem written by Norbert Čapek, the Prague minister who invented the flower communion 100 years ago. This was written while he was imprisoned by the Gestapo a few months before he was sent to his death, believed to be in a gas chamber in Dhaka, although we don't know for sure. But he wrote this while in prison. Even though 1,000 times disappointed and fallen in the fight, even though faced with a world which now seems worthless, I have lived amidst eternity. Be grateful, my soul. Be grateful, my soul. I have lived amidst eternity. So, in that spirit, I invite you to think about the great gift you have of living amidst eternity against all odds. We are going to come out of this time of silence with more words from Čapek. The hymn, Mother Spirit, Father Spirit. I'm going to invite you to stay seated while we sing this softly. I imagine Čapek saying these words on his knees in prayer. And I'm not going to ask you to get on your knees. So we're in between standing and on our knees when we sing this from our seats. Ronnie, want to just play the tune through? It's number 8 in the hymnal. The words will be up there. Some of you will know it.
Must
So even those of you who've never been through flower communion might have gotten from some of these words what an unbelievably amazing man Norbert Chopik was. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this flower communion for those of you who are new, even though we do this every year and a lot of UU congregations around the nation do this every year. I always enter this with the spirit that it's new to someone, and I want to make sure that they get a chance to appreciate what we're doing and why we do it. So this is exactly this particular day, the 100th anniversary of the first celebration of the first flower communion in the city of Prague, in what is today the Czech Republic. But at the time it was first celebrated, Prague was only recently on the tail end of World War I, and it was the capital of a new country, Czechoslovakia, fashioned out of the ruins of World War I. Prague was struggling, and there was a new Unitarian church that had been founded in 1921, 3 years after the end of the war, by Norbert Chopik and his wife, Maya. And they had spent the war in exile here in the United States. And during that exile, they became acquainted with Unitarianism. Chopik had been raised by a strictly Catholic mother and was very interested in religion, had become a Baptist. And while he was here in exile, he came to feel that the Baptist faith just wasn't big enough for where his spirit was going. He had 8 children at that point by his first wife, who had died, and he and Maya were raising them, and they thought it was important for them to go to church. And they did a very extraordinary thing. They sent the children out to church in Orange, New Jersey, where they were living. They said, find a church that feels right to you. So the church children went to Sunday school, and it went on for a while, and the children weren't happy until they went to the Unitarian church in Orange. And the children came back and said, this is really good. And then they went again, and they still liked it. So the parents started going. And they ended up joining the church, and when they came back to Prague, it was with the intention of creating a Unitarian church, which they did, I would say, out of nothing, except they had very strong relationships with Thomas Masaryk, the new president of Czechoslovakia. So they got a nice boost from him dedicating their building, and they grew to have 3,200 people by the 1930s in their congregation, all kinds of programs in the congregation. And early on, he was concerned with how beaten down the community still was from World War I, and he was trying to think of some way of lifting up people's spirits. And that's where he got the idea of having everybody bring a flower to church, making a big bouquet, and everybody going home with a different flower, and the message being, there is so much beauty in community, and it isn't just what you bring, it's what you find there and what you end up receiving. And it's been done in many different ways over the years. Lately, the new minister there, who Carl quoted in our chalice, in our call to worship, has been encouraging people to be creative. So now some people bring flowers, some people bring cakes with flowers drawn on them, some people draw little paintings of flowers. All of these things get brought to their flower communion and distributed to people. It's not just flowers. And one of the things he's been insistent on is he brings nettles, stinging nettles. He says, it has to be difficult for someone. And so this is an idea, we've talked here about living tradition. This is how the congregation that invented flower communion keeps it as a living tradition. And I'm going to, further on in this, actually say something about burrs, and we're going to not have burrs in here for you this year, but I'm going to encourage you to think about different ways to think about flower communion going forward. So, as you heard, the church went through a tremendous time of prosperity, but then came something unimaginably terrible, the Nazi invasion of Czechoslovakia, and Maya was caught in this country. She had gone to the United States to do fundraising, and she couldn't get back, so she was separated from the family. And Norbert was preaching things that were not particularly appreciated by the Nazis, and they were watching him very closely. And one day he was arrested for listening to foreign BBC radio broadcasts. And he was sent to a prison where there were a bunch of different priests from different groups, priests and pastors, and they weren't supposed to be mingled in with other prisoners. But during the war, a person who was running this prison made a unilateral decision and shipped them all off to be killed one way or another. And that happened to Chopik. No one really knows exactly when or how. His wife didn't find out he was dead till 1945. She was still in this country, and at that time she introduced the Flower Communion to First Parish, Cambridge, one of the oldest Unitarian churches in the country. And from there it spread around the country, and it's probably the single most widely celebrated communion, perhaps with water communion, in our denomination. So there's a very, very mixed history of sadness as well as triumph in this flower communion. One of the things in Czechoslovakia they've become interested in is not letting people come up and pick whichever flower is most beautiful to them to go home with. And so here and in Czechoslovakia, they use children to just randomly give you your flower when you come up. And if that's not the most beautiful flower to you, part of your spiritual job is to figure out the beauty in what you get. And so that is one of the reasons that we randomize what you take home in this communion. Now, this communion is so simple, but like a biblical passage, it can be interpreted in so many ways, and that varies from year to year. I was looking back a few years ago, and I preached that, and we should be especially appreciative of what's in front of us, because over time, climate change is going to change what can be in our shared offering. And we should be thinking about this as a photograph of where we are in time in dealing with this terrible crisis of climate change, and amidst all of these other messages. Now, as the eighth principle movement got started, this principle asking UU congregations to adopt a policy of trying to build beloved community through dismantling racism, through accountable actions, which are working with the NAACP is one of the accountable actions. We're dealing with the group that will tell us how we're doing. Through accountable actions to dismantle racism and other oppressions, because they are all related in ourselves and in our systems. As we started talking about this a couple of years ago, I put out a request to the flower people, both present and past. What could we do to reflect this development in our congregational life? And Anne Jeanette Lamac, who hasn't been coming for a long time because she moved over the mountains to Rochester, and the family's life got oriented eastward as the kids went to school in Sharon and things like that. I hadn't heard from her a long time, and she responded, and she made the suggestion that we think about including burrs, because burrs stick to everything, and if we're really doing dismantling racism correctly, it will stick to everything. And so I brought this up with the flower buds, who are my goalies. They keep me from doing anything that will lead to points for the other team. And they said, we really don't want burrs stuck in here and people pricking themselves and everything like that. And so I asked for Liam to put together a slide just showing you some burrs so that the idea is there with us all the different ways that flowers make sure their seeds get distributed by sticking to you. And I want us to think about the ways that our work on dismantling racism can get distributed if we let it stick to us. As an added element for Flower Communion this year. But I want to bring this to a close so we have time to do the communion and then have a brief gathering and get back here for the very important work of the annual meeting, which is another form of love in action. So many, many years ago, when I was dealing with my discomfort with the Lord's Prayer, I wrote a version of it dedicated to flowers. And I have revised it over and over. Part of my practice is to look at it each year and say, how does it have to be spoken this year? And we blessed the hands that do all that in the song that Ronnie had for the choir. Now we're going to bless the flowers themselves that are before us before we distribute them. So I invite you to join me in the Our Flowers 2023 prayer. And let's read this in unison. Our flowers who show us heaven, we cherish your names, your shapes, your colors and scents. Give us this day nourishing beauty. May your families survive our trespasses and inspire us to forgive those who harm us. Lure us away from greed and folly and wastefulness. May we seek our glory in yours. For all of us bloom from a spirit of life-giving love. May it be so forever and ever. Amen. So now that we've properly blessed our flowers, I'm going to invite Poppy and the kids whoever's going to help us distribute the flowers. Oh, there they are. Maya Wesley. So we'll invite people on this side of the room to come from this direction on the far end and from the far end here. And once those are finished, from the outside of the rows to come in and go back up the middle once you have your flower. And Amaya Wesley and Poppy, and maybe I'll come down too, will help give you your random flower for you to discover its beauty. And Ronnie will give us a little bit of flower receiving music. Forward is hard for you. Carl will get you your flower. Well, you look more beautiful than ever, if that's possible. And see, our flower people have the miracle of making sure that there's always extras. So, and may the congregation always have that spirit of abundance for anybody who walks through the door. I invite you to sing We Laugh, We Cry as our closing song. And stand in body or spirit. So my benediction is going to be very brief. Before I give it, I'm inviting our clerk of the board and the congregation class up to tell you what is going to be done to make sure we have a quorum for the annual meeting. You want to stand on the mic?
Okay, this is probably the least spiritual benediction you'll ever have. But what we're going to do is I'm going to be standing about on that side of the door back there with a membership list. And so I'll need members to check in with me. We'll need to reach about 43, 44 voting members to reach quorum. Once I've hit quorum, I don't need to have you check in with me anymore, but I'll probably just continue until we're ready. And only members can vote. Everyone, I believe, can participate in conversation, in discussion, but only members can actually vote. So that's what's really important. I'm going to go refresh my coffee, and then I will be standing at the door with a list and a pen, and just make sure if you're a member, you stop by me and make sure I have you on my list for the meeting. And once I know there's quorum, I will let chair or president of the board know, and then we can proceed.
Carl can refresh your coffee.
Carl can refresh my coffee.
There's never an end to the great things a worship associate can do. And we're serious about the invitation for non-members to participate and ask questions. Some of our most active congregants are non-members for a variety of personal reasons that we respect. And but the bylaws require that only members vote, and that's why that's how we determine the quorum. So with that, I thank you who are staying for this really important moment in the life of the congregation. And for the rest of you, I hope to see you next week, if you can come back again for a very, very different kind of service. And meanwhile, I hope your week is a beautiful one, and that these values you take or go out and, yes, Elio. We'll be extensively publicizing that here in every week leading up to it.
Oh, delish, yes. And then there's a festival with music and vendors, anything. Chat with me. Y'all are definitely welcome.
Great. Thank you. All right. Post-salute time, Ronnie.